Well, then let's hop in. It's great to meet you, Dylan. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's begin our journey before we get into your work as the founder of SunnyHQ by asking you this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing our lives, changing so much about the way we lived. How much, how did you get through that? And how much of living through that has changed the way that you approach things today?
Yeah, I think for me, it started earlier. So, I mean, I really feel like we were prepared in a lot of ways for that kind of crazy time. We had started down this process before that of wanting to actually move from. We lived in North Carolina and wanted to move at the time, and got three kids, and we're going to take two of them with us. One was in college at the time, and so we had decided at that point to kind of move on and find someplace quote unquote inspirational. So we moved to Costa Rica, and but even for the 5 years up until that point, had really done a lot of inner work. Had really kind of found lockstep with business, and I was consulting a lot at the time, and really at the beginning of starting what is Sunny HQ today. And so it was interesting. By the time I actually saw a lot of positives. Then I was talking about this with someone yesterday, how the positives that I see that COVID brought, right, is that the irony is although we were separated from one another, in a lot of ways, I felt like it became more acceptable to be connected, right? So we invited people into our homes. People were working from home, Zoom hits, and all the other kind of video conference tools, but it enabled us to kind of relax a little bit. It's not like, we wanted to come with our best self, right? But I didn't see, at least from others, this definite need that everyone had to be dressed, and if a cat walks by in the back, or one of our kids walks by, it's just what happens, right? And so I really felt like that was nice. And I think even today it's nice that we've kept that. I think there's some obvious challenges when we're separated and using things like Zoom. We lose a little bit of the humanity, but in a lot of ways, maybe the offset is okay, because that it enables us to, and for me, right, it enables me to be more in control of my schedule, to be, more integrated. Work seems to be much more integrated. Definitely today, work is way more integrated than it ever was 15 years ago for me.
Yeah.
When I was at work, I was at work and way too focused on work. My personal life suffered hugely because of that. And I felt the need to always be busy. Busy meant success. Very one dimensional though, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I see a lot of positives.
Absolutely. I do too. So let me ask you this. If we had to synthesize what you do on a daily basis for a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day at a school, how would you explain what you do on a daily basis for a job?
Um, Communication. I think that's the key. I think it relates to all businesses, but I mean, what I'm doing regularly is, and I felt this when I started this business, the gap in the marketplace was quite literally communication. I mean, I think that you can design systems to get ahead, but it's more about how we connect the systems with people, and the only way to do that is to be able to communicate effectively. And so it's really, what I find on a regular basis is we're quite literally helping. Now that we've got the system, this platform in place for incredible hosting, it's super fast, it's super reliable, but it comes down to helping our customers achieve what they need to with their website. This thing's broken. I don't know how to do this. Remind me how to log in. All of these things, and then they're not speaking our language typically, so it's coming to the table with a willingness to listen. So that's a huge one. So communication, it's like 80 80% listening, 20% speaking. And so that's, I think, a big part of my day is quite literally, I was going through this with my son yesterday. He's in online school, and he didn't understand something. The teacher sent him an email, and quite frankly, I didn't understand it either. Communication, right? So I explained to him, it's like your best bet is to take what you can from that, repeat that back. Do you mean this? And he said,
Yeah.
why do I need to do that? It's her job. It's like, that doesn't matter whose job it is,
Yeah.
right? Do you want to get to the next stage, which is understanding? If it is, in my experience, doing this for 30 years, right? It's about just repeating that. And if you didn't get it right, then they're going to respond and then you can move the ball forward.
So essentially, you're a WordPress hosting and support platform. That is
Correct.
essentially,
Yeah.
you know, when I think about support, and I'm in IT, I'm a technician for a school district. And I remember the HTML days, front page, all of those things. You find a hoster, and I'm curious, you know, from a customer service standpoint, there's nothing better, in my view, than Apple. It's all based here. There's an easy level of understandability. There's a level of it that just makes sense. It's the gold standard. It's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why their products are so expensive. You know,
Hmm.
it's just this. So what was kind of a template that you went off of when you decided you were going to do your own thing?
I mean, you said it. I mean, Apple. I worked with Walt Disney Imagineering for a while in my early career. So I took culture from Disney. And because I owned a branding marketing agency for about 10 years, I became a big student of take what's right. If a car company does this really well and you guys are selling copies, well, what about that is related? What methods? These guys spent $10 million on this ad campaign or this marketing or this cultural aspect. Let's take those things and deploy that for you. They've done all the learning.
Yep.
And absolutely Apple for us is a big part of what I've seen. It's why we're expensive. We have to we have to educate most of the people that come to our site and say, hey, the first question might be, well, gosh, I mean, I can get hosting for $10 a month. Why are you 200? And then when I walk them through that, it's quite literally, we're Apple level of service. When
Yeah.
and it's why we don't work with people that where we don't host the website. And I use that example, right? I'd say, look at Apple. Like they control the operating system and the hardware. That means they're 100% responsible. If something's wrong, you go to Apple. If something's wrong with Dell, now Dell expands a little bit, of course, but still, you're talking about Windows and then the hardware. And that's a little bit better today, right, than it was 10 years ago. But it still for us, if you go to someone, typically the environment, and you've seen this, right? You host with WP Engine. Well, customer goes to WP Engine, they say this is broken. Well, the first problem with that is that WP Engine pushes back, or any of the big guys, right?
Uh-huh.
They push back and they say, well, what's broken? Well, that person doesn't know what's broken.
Yeah.
They just know it's broken. This doesn't work. Now, it might be a very simple fix, but they don't have the language to know that it's that plugin or it's simply the form button or whatever the small thing is. They just say, well, it's broken. I see this with my parents, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't turn on, it's broken,
Yeah.
right? Or,
Yeah.
my kids, Dad, what's wrong with this? It's not broken. Just,
Right.
and so I found that, so if we control the environment, then I know our caching systems kick ass, right? I know our security systems kick ass. So I don't have to worry about this. I don't need this plugin from this guy and that other plugin, or I'm not depending on some hosting environment that's quite frankly just slow,
Yeah.
because that's a big piece of what people don't understand is, you go to one of these big guys, you may pay him $30 a month, but your site sits on a server with 1,000 other sites. And so if that guy has some JavaScript thing that's running rampant, it affects your website, but their support people don't connect. They don't really care, right? I mean, it's like, here's your environment and you just want your site to work. And so there's this giant gap in communication that happens that we just solve by, we don't have account people, we don't have project managers, we have support experts. We have WordPress experts. They answer the emails, they answer phone calls, they're critical thinkers. And that means our support time is like 10 minutes,
Yep.
right? They get it. They're like, oh, yeah. Or I need to clarify this. What's wrong? Okay. Yeah. Or are you saying this is wrong? Yes. Okay. We fixed it. And that saves so much time. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Absolutely. So when you were a kid, when you were 12, 13 years old, what was your dream? What was your the gig that you wanted to go for?
Yeah, and the gig, I either wanted to be two ends of the spectrum. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, or I wanted to be a marine biologist. Those were the things that, and then I found out the helicopter pilot I'm still thinking about, but the marine biologist, I'd love to scuba dive. I'm a rescue diver. I do all the things, but money played a bigger role. And I was like, I'm passionate about this, but I don't see that there's like a ramp of money in
Yeah.
that. I really got to love that, and maybe that was a problem. It definitely was later in life to place so much importance on that, but that's where I was.
So where were you born and raised?
Man, all over. I get to claim a lot of different places. I claim Texas for the
Yeah.
most part, but my parents divorced when I was young, and so a little bit of North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, most of the formative years. So from like 12, through college was in Texas. And
Okay.
so, yeah, for the most part, that's where I met my wife, and that's where I claim home.
Okay. So, what were the early seeds that were planted that allowed you to dream, be a pilot, to be a biologist, to get into technology, to be an entrepreneur? What were all of those things that eventually have evolved into who you are today?
You know, I think that for the most part, I saw my parents working. My dad worked for himself, so there was definitely a guide there. And so that was something I knew was available, or something that I didn't know wasn't available. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have a kind of a 9 to 5er. I mean, he ran his own construction business, and then my mom, when she remarried, she had gone to work for a family-owned business in the lingerie business, and so it was very much, the whole family worked there, right? And so I think it's funny, I haven't been asked that, but now when I think about it, that was a thing that was possible. And then very early on, I did have some really incredible mentor bosses, but it was very obvious to me that like there were things I wanted to do that were outside the scope of what that business did. And I didn't feel like I had the leeway to do it unless it was my business, right? And so I mean, even when I was in college, I ran my own design business and, did designs for logos and websites and things like that. And even drafted on the side. My degrees are in design and architecture. And so I, I found I was like, I enjoyed the idea of pitching work, of doing work, of controlling my own time, having to figure out all the things that you had to figure out. It was interesting. It didn't excite me at all to be kind of in a place where it was very one dimensional, right? I'm going to work down this path and only focus on this. I looked attractive at one point, in middle of careers, but I very easily got back out of that zone.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's been that inspirational force? Who's been that hero for you that's allowed you to evolve to this point in your life?
Probably people way outside my industry. I mean, I think that more just the inspiration of from even musicians. I'm a Bob Marley lover,
Yeah.
and just the idea of creation. And in fact, my it's funny, my business, on one side is I run SunnyHQ. Now in the past year, I've been working on a book that's going to be published in a couple of months. But when I think about the people that I look at pretty frequently, they're in the creative arts, right? They're actors or they're musicians. And the thing that excites me is that they talk about their work in projects. Right. They talk about whether it's, they're an actor, and so they work on these films, their projects, and they produce over here. And that's the thing that excites me is that, and even today, it continues to give me, so for instance, I'm actually working on two other side businesses that I'm looking to see is, are there legs to this thing? Will this work? Because I've recognized that, that, well, where I really find a lot of comfort is where a lot of people don't, which is the not knowing. It's the early parts of business. It's the puzzle. It's the making those things kind of work. And so I'm really comfortable kind of code shifting and working on many things at one time. I get bored kind of fast. And so for me, it's better to have. So right now, I'll be on this podcast, but then I'll jump over to some Sunny HQ for an hour, and then I'll jump in and finish writing chapter one of the book again. And then I've got some publishing things to do, and then I've got some social media things to do. And so I'm really comfortable in that environment. And I really think I learned that from people in the creative arts.
Speaking of music, what was the first concert that you saw that blew you away? What was that early concert experience?
It blew me Pink Floyd for sure.
Wow. What
Yeah.
tour was it?
Um, what was that?
Was it the one with the heads on the album that came out? Um, or was it early on?
No, it was in the 80s.
Okay.
80s or early 90s. I can't remember. It's huge though. It was at Texas Coliseum. So I mean it
Yeah.
was like, it was super big lasers. Of course, it's Pink Floyd. And
Yes.
so, I mean, you can't, that was the first one that I was just like, whoa, that one, or, maybe a tie. I mean, when I think about one of my favorite bands, and favorite shows ever is U2, the Joshua Tree.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, two ends of the spectrum too. You got Pink Floyd,
Uh-huh.
immersive and lights, and then you got U2. Man, it's just like guys up on a stage. Yeah, they had lights, but it's just their presence.
Yeah.
And to this day, I mean, their music, I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. It's
That's
just
wild.
really incredible.
Did you see the film that Bono put out on Apple?
Yeah, yeah, I just watched that.
Dude, that's
Yeah, so
crazy,
good.
isn't it? I mean, you just have no idea. You're just sitting there, you're like, dude, this is Bono. This happened
Yeah,
to you? Like it was
yeah.
just bizarre. So talk to me a little bit about the book, The Seven Mirrors.
Yeah, so it's about, and so I guess this came from really some kind of direct involvement with a couple of people that, you get to this stage in life. I'm 55, and I've been thinking about writing a memoir, mostly for me. I don't know that there's any, I think about the memoirs out there, the people that we follow, right? And it's like I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not Matthew McConaughey. I didn't go here and do this, um, but on the other side, I've had a lot of experience in the last, especially 10 to 15 years with the failure of a business, almost the failure of a marriage, to really rebuilding a new business and a new life that where I experience joy every day. And from talking with some others, was really pushed hard to say, Dylan, this is something this is a story you need to tell, and really gave that a lot of thought. And so the book is called The Seven Mirrors: A Guide to Remembering Yourself. And the basis is it's a memoir, but with some practical kind of teaching aspect to it. And it's more of I guess using the experiences that I've had, and saying, really, quite frankly, in the beginning, saying, look, here's things that have worked for me. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychotherapist, but I can tell you, if you're not experiencing joy in your life, you can.
Yeah.
I have changed. People change. I hate when people say people don't change, because the reality is, whether people like it or not, everyone changes every single day. Now, we all have a decision to make, right? We all have a decision every day to gain awareness, to be more accountable, to really realize that it's not about the things that are out there, it's the things that are in here. And once we shift that, then there's a whole world that's open to us. So the basis for the book too is that I really believe that we hear this all the time in a lot of different circles, right? That we're trying to achieve this higher version of ourselves, right? And you probably heard that, and that never sat right with me. For me, what I came to understand, it's really more about remembering who we are. So we're born perfect, right? It's through conditioning, and then some of us adapt, more frequently out of grave need to adapt to our environment. Some just because it's what's available. Some of us, like myself, who believed I needed to please everyone around me, and if I acted this way, if I had behaviors and personality this way, that's what fit, or that's what I thought that fit. Right? It's interesting. There's all different variations of that. And what I've learned is that if once we start to strip those things away, once we heal those traumas within ourselves, then we can truly remember the incredible power that each of us has and the ability that we have to connect with others. And so it really walks through, it uses mirrors as a metaphor for that. So, for instance, the first chapter is called The Storyteller. And the idea is you're not your story, you're the storyteller.
Yep.
And the idea being, how many times have you been in a bar or at a restaurant or something like that? And the entire topic of conversation is really about someone's past, right? And there's a fine line in there, right? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but when we start to derive who we are only by the things that we've done and not our capabilities, right? Then we're really kind of stuck in that.
Yep.
And so that chapter really talks about how I learned that, and then some ways to really uncover that within yourself and some ways to work on that. And really it just walks through those things in a number of different mirrors.
So Charles Bukowski, the poet, once said, "We're born geniuses and buried idiots." So I
Yeah.
think about what you were saying; it's totally true. The interesting thing, I come from that old world of like Dreamweaver and making websites and getting into HTML, and I remember seeing Radiohead's website in the early days and how innovative it was. And there was some other websites. Like there's a jazz musician. She's no longer with us, but she's very eclectic. Her name is Carla Bley. Her
Hmm.
website's a total trip. And I think about,
Yeah.
you know, WordPress is kind of this aggro old school, yet you can really push the boundaries on it. You can really go to places if you know what you're doing that's pretty
Hmm.
fantastic. So my question to you, my build up is, what was one of the first websites you saw that just totally blew you away, that either consciously or subconsciously laid the foundation for what you want out of a website?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll go back to Apple. I mean, I think Apple's done this in a controlled way because, when I started my first business, I was a branding marketing agency, and, right at 2000, 2001. So things were just starting to kick in, right? But we were doing things, and many people were doing things for the sake of doing them. Because I remember having some of those early conversations and saying, like, the navigation goes on the top or the left. That's it. And really today it's at the top. It's you don't get in a car, for instance, and try to figure out where to put the key, right? There's no innovation that's happening with that. Choose places to innovate that really work. And I continue to look at Apple. There's a beautiful design to what they do. And you look at today, there's a lot that they do on desktop that's different than mobile for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. There's different environments, but very immersive. They've really you know, integrated design, integrated motion, integrated in some cases even sound in a way that's thoughtful, but not for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
And I think so. It's funny how there was a bunch of things early on where you're like, oh, that's incredible. But at the end of the day, like people have to use it. And so I remember having a lot of those early discussions and having to talk people down. Today, more that those talks are, why you don't need a chat bot or an AI bot, right? I mean, it's like just because there's a whiz bangy thing out there doesn't mean you need to use it. I think about this all the time in video production, right? There's, or even, video production or, PowerPoints or keynote presentations, you know, man, go with a cut or a wipe.
Yes.
You need to live in this zone. But you don't live out there because page curls and sparkles and all those things, it's funny how they even put those in there because, if you put it in there, someone's going to use it. But I think, the restrainedness of what Apple does, because at the end of the day, it's an interface, right? It's this beautiful marriage. I talk about this all the time, man. Web development to me, out of any creative piece of work, is the most complicated thing that I've ever seen, right? I mean, it involves the most skill sets because, even movies, right? Yeah, a movie takes, 100 people to work on it. But the reality is, I can't touch the screen, right? Those people design something that's, yes, it's moving, but it's a static presentation
Yeah,
that I don't have. My involvement is on a different level. Whereas a website, someone has to know where to find a button, know where to find the information they're looking for. And so I think, yeah, Apple does it really, really well.
they certainly do. So what, I saw a post yesterday or the other day. Alex, who runs Podmatch, put a post up about kind of just what it's like to be an entrepreneur. On the one side of it, they look to you for all this stuff, but you got to take a lot of the dirt from customers. And there's just a lot that goes into it. What is it? What motivates you every day to do this work? I mean, you got a lot on your shoulders. You're taking care of your staff. You got a lot of people that depend on you. It's a lot of pressure, but you have a soul that needs to be nurtured. What is that
Mhm.
energy every day for you to do all of that at a high level?
And this is something I coach with leaders. So I mean, I think it's you have to find for you, right? Where's that middle ground? So because yeah, you're right. I could let the business drive me. So is the business owning you or are you owning the business? And what that means is I need to find those opportunities. So if I'm doing something three times and I'll catch it to myself, I'm like, man, I can't believe, oh, that's an indicator I need someone else to do that thing, right? It doesn't mean that it's not worth being done. It just means that I'm not the right, if I'm not passionate about what that is, right, then I need to find someone because there are plenty of people out there that are passionate about that thing.
Yep.
And so it's for me, it's finding that middle ground. So for instance, one of those key areas for me, obviously analytics are a big part of our website. I do not want to know a thing about Google Analytics. That is one of the most complicated interfaces. But the cool thing is, there's about 1 billion people out there
Yep.
that love Google Analytics. And so I pay those people to do that. And the same thing goes for every aspect of our business, even with writing the book, right? I know because of my experience, there's a lot that I could do, for instance, to publish the book. I've studied it, I've researched it, but I also know the extreme value in having a publisher work with me because of their time and experience
Yep.
and their ability to shortcut different things. So it's recognizing that and being willing. I think a lot of entrepreneurs take on too much. I know I did. Whether that's because you can't afford it, right? And I get that in the beginning. There are things that you have to set up your own email. That's so you have to figure that out. But recognizing that that's not completely sustainable, right? So recognizing when you can, maybe you don't hire the guy that's $1,000, hire somebody that's $100
Yep.
to do that thing and get them to do that one thing. Chip away at it, chip away at those little pieces that help you. I mean, I talk about this a lot. Where building your business from a place of complete alignment instead of urgency, right? So I can choose, and I did in my first business. Because back to that, I'm busy. Busy means success means, well, there's always something in the agency to do, right? There's always another client. There's always an issue. There's always something that's broken. There's always a different design to do. But realizing that if I'm going to be really effective and retain the amount of passion that I have about, then I need to focus that to a much more narrow area and get people to fill in those other gaps.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: of everything that you've done in your career and your life and evolved to and overcome, what are you the proudest of?
I'm the proudest of reconnecting with my family for sure. I'm the proudest of in this new era of business, of having built something that allows me the time and the freedom to be there for my wife and be there for my kids, to help them understand, everything that I've been through and help them to understand where they are in this world and to continue to be there for them.
So, Dylan, everyone has a perception of you: family, friends, clients, all of your employees, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a compassionate listener. I'm a problem solver. Um, I'm a creative force. I am a helper and a guide.
So, if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and be in either Steve Jobs' garage or in that first company that Bill Gates was trying to come up with code with all of Balmer and all those guys, what eureka tech moment would you love to have watched?
Um, I'd probably lean towards Steve Jobs for obvious reasons. I'm an Apple nerd.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, probably the iPhone.
yeah,
I think that, that's I think there's a lot of people that had an idea about that. Because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. I mean, that was going to happen no matter what. But I think it would have been incredible to not just be there for the idea part, but the realization to see that first device and
yeah,
go, whoa. Because I
yeah,
remember. I remember having the iPod, the first big white
yeah,
ones when the video came out on that. I remember I bought like a season of Lost and was on a flight and
yeah,
watched, had a screen about this big. And, I remember going, this is incredible stuff. But I
yeah,
think, when that phone came out and we went from, at the time we moved, there were a lot of flip phones, but Nokia was big and we'd like that form factor. But when things started to happen in that, it was obvious about what a huge thing that was, and obvious today, what's going on. I mean, there's not many people that don't have one of those in their hands.
yeah. I remember the first iPod I got, which was the white one with the circle. And I
Yep.
was just like, oh my God, I can put all my music on here. I just
Right.
had stacks of CDs around me. Like, it
Yeah.
was my eureka moment. Like, I am going to listen until my brain falls out. It was
Yeah.
so cool.
Did you rip your music?
Oh my God, yeah. I ripped
Yeah.
everything I could and I was like, I'm putting everything. And I was like, I just kept muttering, I can't believe that all of this is in this
Right.
little thing. And I just
Yeah.
listened and loved it. I had audiobooks. It was so much fun, man. Um, so if anyone wants to get your book, if anybody wants to reach out, get involved with your platform, any of the good business that you're doing, where's the best place to go?
Yeah. So for Sunny HQ, the best thing is just go to sunnyhq.io. If you go to sunnyhq.io/podcast, there's a great little download. Just give us your email address and you've got to download it. It's got really short questions to give you some thoughts on how you can better your own website. And then, of
Yeah.
course, we're here to help. And then for me, just go to dylanclaytonbost.com and just please, yeah, sign up. I'm going to be sending out the first chapter to everyone that signed up, and then you'll be on the list to receive the information when the book's published.
I love it, man. This has been wonderful, Dylan. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story, and thank you for taking me to that Joshua Tree concert. What a man! That album to this day, it's timeless. It never
Killer.
gets old, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
What a cool thing,
Yeah.
Dylan. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Best of luck
Thanks,
with
Joe.
everything. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.